We are diving deep into the world of aggregators, and we want to talk about why there are no aggregators for equipment rental businesses. I think everybody is quite familiar with a lot of companies that are controlling and owning the demand on their specific fields. A couple examples are, for example, Uber for car rides and Airbnb for short-term rentals. But is this actually the case that there are no aggregators, or are there just not any successful ones? So, Tuomo, are there any rental aggregators in the space?
Yeah, so if we look into equipment rentals, there are, of course, aggregators. I think in most product categories, there always is some aggregator. I think the question is then that, is there a dominant player that would dominate across like national borders, or would be kind of operating both in North America and Europe and running equipment rentals? There, I think the answer is that there isn't a clear dominant aggregator that would be controlling the demand and the market. So I think there are a few reasons for that. If we think about just rentals from an operational perspective, they are a bit harder maybe to scale. So the supply side can be harder to secure. If you're trying to do a consumer-to-consumer marketplace and aggregating kind of the demand and then just facilitating consumer-to-consumer rentals, the hard part is the fact that what happens in between orders. There's inspection, there's the kind of refurbishing of items, and that can be quite burdensome. So that kind of hits the supply a bit. So I think in most marketplaces, it's actually like the consumer to consumer, at least there's maybe 2 to 5% of people that actually kind of actively supply the marketplace constantly. And then 90% or more just leach out of the supply of the active 5%. So I think that kind of more laborsome procedures that happen in between rentals is one reason for that. If you combine the amount of supply and the average order value of a booking, you start to operate from a marketplace perspective, you might operate in a quite challenging unit economics. So let's try to have an example that I have let's say the average order value of a booking in my marketplace is $60. Then I have let's say that I have a pretty high kind of a marketplace or transaction fee, let's say 20%. So that gives me $10 that I secure from that actual sale there. Now, with that $10 or euros, I needed to somehow make that transaction happen in the first place. So I needed to probably, as an aggregator, I needed to bring the demand to the marketplace. Many of these marketplaces, the first years, they kind of have to drive the demand with paid marketing. $10 for that can be, it's already kind of quite limited that how much you can pay in customer acquisition. So unless you turn into an organic household name, it can be hard to kind of drive repeat sales there or repeat bookings to the platform. And then the core challenge being that the average order value is so much lower. Whereas if you compare it to, I don't know, Airbnb or similar, the average booking is probably a lot higher than $50.
There's probably also some kind of limitation in like the area that you are operating. So I think small items you might be able to ship. But if we're talking about lawn mowers or anything like that, you probably, like the unit economics don't actually make sense if you want to start moving that to different cities.
It has to be super local. So there are, like you said, there might be categories where the item can be shipped. And this is probably the reason why some of these booking platforms are super niche or vertically specialized. So let's say I have a marketplace where people can rent board games and puzzles. Those are somewhat easy to ship, and maybe that user base is willing to go through the trouble of making sure that all of the pieces are there between bookings. But then, like you said, lawnmowers, even drones or anything a bit more complicated. I think it was one marketplace that said that they kind of found out that in order for that transaction to happen, if it's consumer to consumer, they needed to be like 0.6 miles apart, so like less than a kilometer. And if you think about the supply and demand and you start to kind of draw those circles, they start to be quite limited pockets and markets. Now, how this might be turned around is that then you kind of invite a lot more professional supply to the market where, you know, you have more supply and they are probably running this kind of a booking operation already. So they're more willing to just like look into this channel as extra sales rather than the only channel. And that they're kind of already going through the hassle of renting stuff. That might be a solution, but then you have to provide those merchants with appropriate tools that not only help them list in your marketplace, but probably means that they can run their business with that tool. And that's something at Twice, which we believe that is our job, that as a white label re-commerce OS, is to make sure that anyone using Twice is capable of listing their items easily to whatever marketplace there is.